The single most question I get asked on a daily basis with regard to Kerbal Space Program or anything like that, above everything else, the most asked question is, how do I get better at the game? And I was watching this video by Felix Zemdegs, which was actually a rip-off of a video by Noah Cubes talking about the mountain analogy for improving. This wasn't a video specific to Kerbal Space Program, or really specific to anything when you really think about it. It's kind of a good way of looking at a lot of things, but I thought it was kind of a nice way of like looking at how to kind of get better at something. So the video in essence boiled down to this. We've got a y-axis and an x-axis. This side is capability, not left enough room here, and skill. And then you improve up it's like a mountain slope like this. So you could be anywhere on this mountain. Right at the top, you kind of got the best KSP players, whoever you may decide that is. And then down here, you kind of might be right at the beginning. You've just got the game and don't really know what you're doing. You could be like sort of halfway up, but you basically want to get to the top of the mountain. That's kind of, you know, as good as you can get, really. So getting to the top of the mountain requires you getting better in both capability and in your skill. And the way you ascend in both capability and skill is a little bit different, and you can actually sort of break this down a little bit. Let's try and find another colour. So it's not just a mountain, you actually climb the mountain by going up some stairs. So we can draw a staircase like this. And with each step you go up with capability and then you go along with skill, and you kind of have to work on both in order to climb up the mountain. So when you first start out, the first big one would be launching a rocket. So you climb that step there. So you first of all, you won't be able to do it at first, so kind of you figure out how staging works and how to combine fuel tanks, engines, and you get there, you launch the rocket, but then you can launch a rocket fine, but you're not going to get very far until you practice it. So you practice kind of launching various ships that can get into the high atmospheres, things like that. You work on the skill. Then the next step after launching a rocket into KSP would typically be getting into orbit. So you kind of maybe like watch a video on that or a tutorial, kind of build up that skill so you kind of learn how to do it, but then it's still not going to be very second nature for a while. So you want to just do that over and over and over again, launching lots of rockets, and that kind of builds up your skill, and you kind of come along here. And then you kind of go from there. So the next step, logically, for most people would be to get to Mun or Minmus, learn how to do that. Kind of the Stop Mountain tutorial or anyone else's tutorials are always kind of good ones to go for. Kind of learn how to do that again. Once you've done it once, you probably won't be that proficient at it. You probably will still need a video as a co-pilot. So you do a few more and you build up that skill. But then if you don't go any further and you only go to Mun and Minmus, you probably won't ever really get much further up the mountain. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle. It's because I see people on the forums or even in my own Discord server on Twitter where they've never been to the Mun. They've only ever been to orbit. So they've kind of learned how to get into orbit and kind of like launch a rocket. They've learned how to get into orbit, but they haven't tried learning anything else. They've only really honed their skill. So you can kind of carry on getting skill, but you can see you're not actually getting anywhere higher up the mountain. You're kind of stuck in this area until you go ahead and sort of actively go and learn how to do something. So I think the Noah Cubes described this as deliberate practice versus regular practice. So you can get into orbit and you do kind of lots and lots of practice of getting into orbit, but unless you actually go out of your way to learn a new technique or kind of how to execute something better, as in deliberate practice, you're never going to get any higher up the mountain. You kind of want to learn how to do it and then hone that skill. And then once you do that again, you learn how to do it and go. So once you've kind of got to Mun and Minmus, I think you can kind of fork. You can either go down the interplanetary route, which is what I did, or in hindsight, I think the most logical step would be learn how to do an orbital rendezvous. So you can do things like Apollo missions and just make interplanetary a little bit easier. So you kind of watch a tutorial on docking, because I don't think orbital rendezvous is particularly intuitive unless you kind of know what you're doing or have done it lots of times. Again, going back to the skill thing. So you learn how to do a docking, and then you do it over and over and over again, develop that skill, and then once you've done that, you kind of learn how to go interplanetary, which is kind of a slightly harder version of orbital rendezvous. It's the same sort of ways you do it, and that just builds that up there, and then you go along. Now obviously some steps were bigger than others. I haven't done a very good job illustrating this because all these steps are the same level. But I'd say kind of launching a rocket, it's a much lower step than, say, getting into orbit for the first time, which is a much, much bigger step. Now this whole chart looks really ugly, but I hope that kind of gets it across. But I thought this is kind of a nice way of looking at it, because people see how many hours I've got in the game, which is a high amount, I think. But I think most people are surprised I don't have that many hours. I think my Steam hours are currently, I can actually look this up. I may have just made the video darker because the screen changed. I currently have, as of recording this, 1,181 hours in the game, which is a lot, I think. But some people are surprised because they have more hours and they have this perception that I'm better than them. I'm not saying I am, or if that perception's correct, but a lot of people feel that way. And that's because I get bored very easily. And when I first started out the game, I learned how to get into orbit, but then I immediately wanted to learn how to get to the Mun. So I started binging on videos, making lots of notes, learning how to kind of get the capability to go to the Mun, and then started practicing the skill. But then once I knew how to do it, I didn't hang around. I then immediately tried to learn how to do the next step, figured out how to do it on my own like a few times, so it was becoming a bit more kind of intuitive, and then immediately started learning again. So you got to just keep pushing yourself. You can't just stick at what you do and then just stay level at it, because you're never going to ascend the mountain. You want to keep on learning new things. So say kind of Eve missions would be a very high level amount of skills, kind of learn how to do an Eve ascent and kind of practice those again and again, and eventually you can get there. And then, I don't know, Joule 5 would probably come after that, but we're talking, that's very end game stuff. So yeah, I thought that was kind of a nice way of looking at practice, and that's something I think kind of comes out a lot, because my response to whenever people ask me, how do I get better at KSP, I always say practice. And I've never really thought of a good way of articulating how I would recommend going about practicing. And I saw this kind of video by Noah Cubes and Felix Zemdegs' version of that. And I thought this was kind of a nice way of looking at it, kind of looking at capability versus skill. Yes, you can practice things again and again and again and again, but if all you're doing is making rockets and going into orbit, and you're not really trying to push yourself or kind of learn what is required to go further, you're never going to get any better, and that's why. So it all boils down to practice at the end of the day. If you keep playing the game, you will get better at it. But by doing things like deliberative practice, so looking at specific tutorials, or kind of just doing the in-game tutorials, or just pushing yourself, you'll kind of gain that capability, and then you can hone that skill, get it down, and then you can continue climbing up the mountain. I don't know if this video was particularly helpful, but I thought this was kind of a nice way of looking at kind of practice, because this isn't applicable to just KSP, this is everything. The video I actually kind of saw this was actually about, solving Rubik's Cubes. And, it's like anything really. Like if you look at these kind of like Rubik's Cube tutorial channels, you just see that their cubes are just in horrendous condition because they've clearly done it so many times. And it's the same thing with KSP, I'm just naturally much better at the game than a lot of people because I have a lot more hours in the game. But there are ways you can enhance the way you practice, as in learning new techniques, honing those techniques, and then learning again and again and again, and gradually building up the ladder. So, maybe this wasn't helpful at all. If you liked this, then let me know. I can't really imagine me doing many videos of this specific nature. Maybe we'll do one about eyeballs or something, but that's my other little skill set. But yes, there'll be a video coming later in the week for Planet Coaster and Kerbal Space Program, obviously. So, like I say, hope you enjoyed this. Leave any feedback or other tips of your own down below, and we'll see you in the next one. Hello, so this is kind of now a weird, unnatural tack on to the actual video itself, but I feel like I should probably mention this somewhat in some way, shape or form on the channel and not just on Twitter. And that is that I got this in the post yesterday, which is the silver play button that creators get once they reach 100,000 subscribers. So I feel like I should probably give some sort of thanks or recognition to everyone who hit that subscribe button. It's a real honor, and as you can see, this actually looks different to what the play buttons most people have, because YouTube last month announced their kind of new silver play button design. So it's kind of a nice little thing to say that I was one of the first people to get the new design of the silver play button. Yeah, it's nice, got a bit of weight to it. Apparently it's a more durable and a better quality material, whatever that means, I don't really know. But yeah, I feel like I didn't want to just acknowledge it on Twitter or anything, but I didn't really want to just do an unboxing video because I suck at those. So I thought I'd just give just tack this on to the end of this video, just to say thank you very much for subscribing, and I hope you continue to stay subscribed as we continue along on this adventure and enjoy the content to come. don't think I've missed anything. I think that was everything I wanted to cover. Good. Enjoy the rest of your day.